if a builder behaves badly, then they can lose that certificate, they can lose that license, and therefore they can't practice in that trade under any circumstances. If you're doing home improvement, you're doing it once or twice or 3 times in your life. What do you know about it? It's absolutely insane.
Hello and welcome to our 3rd episode of Build Up from the Basement, our podcast down in the basement. And I'm very excited today. We have got the amazing Mark Garnier MP for Wyre Forest with us today, and we are going to be having a long chat about licensing. Mark, lovely to see you. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you very much. I've played tennis. I've had a very unhealthy biscuit for breakfast afterwards, and now I'm here with you.
Okay, what was your tennis score? That's the most important thing.
It was training. It was a coaching session between 8 and 9. So
Okay.
So I'm a little bit better than I was at 8 o'clock.
So the main reason we're here today is to talk about licensing for builders.
Yep.
So first of all, can you tell our listeners all about your experience and why this matters to you? Why is this sort of on your radar?
So like with all of these things which happen with MPs, they suddenly discover there's a big problem. Quite often it's when they're affected themselves. And it was interesting. I inherited a house in Cornwall, which is very precious to me, and I wanted to renovate and restore it. And I found some builders who I thought were very good. I got to know them quite well. I trusted them. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And so we sort of set off. Got the usual stuff: architects, mortgages, everything you need to be able to do this. And we headed off to do this work. And what was really interesting was, as an aside, I was chatting to various mates of mine who were in the building trade or kind of knew, had done this or were house builders. And they said, oh, God, you better get your solicitors lined up. And I sort of said, no, I know these guys really well. And they said, no, you'll definitely end up in court. They always do. Everything always ends up in court. And I said, no, of course it doesn't. These are really good guys. Anyway, it did, as it's the most extraordinary thing. Now, to be fair to them, the work they did was fine. They did an okay job on that. There are kind of few odd things, but basically it was a good job. The problem was that they massively overran. They then and this is the weird bit about it. So actually, what happened was we kind of paid them all the rest of it. Then they created a fictitious bill at the end of it. So there's a massive dispute about this fictitious bill, and including £30,000 or thereabouts for accommodation for time after the end of the contract. For a contract which they'd overrun when they were the project managers. And they denied they were the project managers, then they admitted it in the court papers and stuff. So what happened was it kind of got more and more messy. We were spending a lot of money on the legal problems. And actually, by the way, this is not just the contractor, the person who actually takes on the building work that gets screwed by these people. It's the subcontractors as well. So we found ourselves working with the subcontractors who were also not getting paid by these people. So they weren't paying people down the line, and they were asking for fictitious money for us, and by a huge amount. And we got a quantity surveyor to come along and have a look at it, and we sort of said, kind of arguably, you may have £1,000 or £2,000 a bit more. Kind of, I can see where there's a bit of a debate on this. They were asking for 120,000 quid. And you've got to go to court. You've got to fight this legally. In the end, we settled out of court. But then there was, we were looking at counter-suing them, but that would have cost us more money, so we weren't insured. So you end up with all of these legal problems. And one of the things that struck me about all of this is that there's an inequality of risk, and this is the whole problem. Because ultimately what happens, and it doesn't matter, in my case was sort of quite a sort of complicated legal bit, but I mean, you get people who get legged over by builders who just do a bad job, whatever. But the problem is your only way of resolving this is going to court, is going down the legal route. There's a contract and all the rest of it. And the problem is this: is that let's say you're a rogue builder, I'm a somebody who's employed you. I can eventually take you to court. You can go to court. The court can rule in my favour against you as a road builder. They can rule that you have to pay compensation and damages, and you have to pay legal costs and all the rest of it. So now I've absolutely covered. You, as a limited liability company, go bust on me. I am still in the same position I was. My house is still messed up. I'm still massively out of pocket. But your business now no longer exists, and you go and you create a new business the next day, and you do the same thing to other people, including subcontractors, including suppliers. And that's the fundamental problem. So there's this massive inequity of risk.
Do you know what? It's absolutely fascinating hearing your story. And also, so just back to the court thing, because this is what's interested me as well. lots of the victims that I've spoken to get so confused by the legal process because Trustmark or whatever don't follow up. The fraud department can't look into it because they haven't got enough evidence. I mean, explain the bit that you told me ages ago about court, and you can only claim up to a certain amount. So if you like earn £100,000 worth of debt, going to court to settle it isn't going to a small claims court isn't going to.
Yeah, that's right. So there are small claims courts, but the fundamental problem that you've got is you as the victim of this can see blindingly, obviously, what's going on. But what you've got to do is you've got to persuade a neutral court. So a neutral court is blind and with the scales and all the rest of it. Justice is it takes no position and looks at the balance of the work. So you've got to prove that you've been legged over. And to be fair, they've got to prove they haven't legged you over. So the problem is you then you have to employ a quantity surveyor. So quantity surveyors are very good, but they'll come along and they'll assess it. They'll sort of say, no, this is in our opinion, this isn't right, and all the rest of it. And you can come up with all of that. Chances are they may have a quantity surveyor as well if they're good at doing this sort of stuff. Then they may have a quantity surveyor who will make an argument for them. So you're by no means certain. I mean, your house could have fallen down, but they could argue that it was something else. It was an earthquake or something, or thermal global nuclear holocaust started, and it wasn't their fault at all. So and they can try and prove that. Well, you've got to then prove it wasn't what they're saying. So by the time you start getting bedded down into this legal process, you're running up a lot of money. And if you want to prosecute one of these cases, the figure you need to have in your mind, certainly when I was doing it, was £150,000. £150,000 on top of what you've already spent on your family home or whatever it is you've been modernising. That is an awful lot of money to put aside that you may not get back even if you've won. And that's the problem, even if you've won.
So bad. So you've met, because I know you have, a lot of your colleagues and spoken to them about this as well. And because pretty much you've got a rogue builder in every patch, I would say. Absolutely, if not, loads of clusters. I know groups of people up north who have all been affected by the same builder. Thousands, millions they've taken. What's your sort of vibe that you're getting with sort of introducing your PMB bill? Because I want you to talk a bit about that. So do you want to talk about, when you first introduced that and cross-party support and what that means?
Yeah, so the idea with that, Ida, is that what I was trying to do was to work out if you could make you could equalise the risk. Okay, so if you're a builder right now, if you're a rogue builder, if you're just a rogue, actually, you can do whatever dodgy thing you do in a limited liability company, take all the money out of it, and then there's nothing to go. You can leave a quid in it, and that's all you've got left, and it goes bankrupt, and that's the end of it. And you can go and do it again. So you've got to have something which the builder loses, and that means they can't work again. So the idea behind this is if you have a licensing regime for builders where they cannot work unless they have a license, or if they do work without a license, they're working illegally, then you've got and then they've got something which they can lose. That means that they have to behave more honestly in order to be able to keep their thing going. So if you liken it to the financial services industry, so if you want to be a practitioner in the financial services industry, from a Goldman Sachs investment banker all the way down to a small sort of pensions advisor in a small town, then you have to be regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. And that means you pay a certain amount of money into it to be a member a year. You have to meet certain standards. And at the end of it, as long as you maintain those standards and when you maintain your membership fees, you can carry on practicing as a financial advisor. We need something similar like that to builders. We've already got it to a certain extent with gas fitters. So gas fitters you have to be a member.
They bring a certificate.
They bring a certificate. Yeah. Absolutely, they do. And so what you want to do is have something like that, so that if a builder behaves badly, then they can lose that certificate, they can lose that license, and therefore they can't practice in that trade under any circumstances. So look, in terms of trying to bring this about, I've been working at this now for 4 or 5 years or so, and I brought forward a couple of private members' bills now, but the vast majority of private members' bills don't really get anywhere. But to a certain extent, they're slightly performative. So what you're essentially doing is you're sort of saying this is an issue, and you use that as something to coalesce other people around it. It's a difficult one. I mean, I've now brought a private member's bill. The first one it got second reading, which is where you're presenting it for the first time. But it was I was trying to do a deal with the government in order for them to take it forward without necessarily having the bill go forward. The government at the time was against regulation.
Was that Conservative government?
I'm hopeful
Go on.
that, as I say, it is one of the sort of the slightly peculiar things about the Conservative Party is, although we brought in the Financial Services and Markets Act 2012 and the Banking Reform Act 2013 to regulate the financial services thing because of the 2008 crash, whilst there's still a whole load of evidence of dodgy builders out there and a need for a licensing regime, and they keep coming back and sort of saying, well, we don't like regulation. Actually, the answer is we don't like bad regulation. What we like is good regulation. It has a good outcome. And actually, where you lack regulation, you can end up with an economic problem. And I think the FMB a few years ago wrote a report that sort of said we are losing £3 billion a year worth of home improvement work because people are fearful of getting legged over by a dodgy builder.
But the point is, you wouldn't, and actually industry wants it. Like you say, you've spoken to lots of builders who want it, and obviously the consumer wants it because you want to have someone you trust doing your building work.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
And who knows? Look, but the other problem is, I mean, if you're Bovis or kind of a big house builder, and you're putting up God knows how many houses the whole time, you've got a massive legal department, but you know how this works. You've got your own quantity surveyors. You are really good at this stuff, and you know how the whole thing works. And they have legal problems as well. If you're doing home improvement, you're doing it once or twice or three times in your life. What do you know about it? It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's really insane. And also, what's your sort of message to all the people? You've got a lot of constituents who you've spoken to about this. What is your message to them? Is it sort of, don't give up hope? Because obviously, if something did come in the future, they're obviously not going to be compensated because the law doesn't work like that. They can't backdate it, right? You have all these cases. So obviously for them, it's really hard because it's, they've been done over by some of them, their whole, life savings, and some of them, dying of cancer, lots of really elderly victims.
There was a guy a few years ago, and I remember reading about this, and he was, he'd had some pointing work done on his house. And this is maybe 20, 25 years ago. It was a long time ago, but it really struck me. Anyway, he went off and did this pointing work. And the builder sort of sent him a bill for, I don't know, 2,000 quid or something. And then he sort of said, oh, well, actually, you still owe me another 2,000 quid. And he just was, oh, I'm sorry about that. Astonishingly, this went on until this pensioner had paid him £250,000 for pointing his chimney. And it was just astonishing. And this builder just sort of thought, well, I've got to, I don't know, maybe he's got dementia or something, I don't know, who knows what. And we're just taking advantage over his like thing. Anyway, eventually this guy committed suicide.
Oh my goodness.
And that was what was done by a road builder. And that's the point. He probably did the pointing really well. But it was just all the other stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, the emotional. I mean, a lot of these people have been through emotional hell with these builders who come in, and it's really personal as well, isn't it? Your house, your house and home. So, Mark, sort of call to action. What is your next move? Are you going to try and get debate in Parliament? Are you going to try and get Matthew Pennycook?
So
what's your next move?
So there's lots of things. So actually, my Prime Minister's bill. So it was talked out the latest one was talked out the other day. And it was slightly weirdly, there was a bit of parliamentary cock-upishness going on all day.
Love it.
And actually, had my bill been one ahead, it would have received second reading without a debate. Anyway, as it turned out, the government whips woke up for the previous one, and then so it was ruled. As I say, it's all this sort of parliamentary theatre, but anyway, basically it was pushed back. Right. So it's Friday the 13th of June is when it's coming back again, but it's a long way down the list. So they won't get to it.
Okay.
And it'll die at that point.
Okay.
So, but nonetheless, the kind of, the fact that we're having this conversation about it now means that it's worked in terms of getting that, highlighting that stuff. And as I say, a lot of this is performative rather than necessarily sort of moving forward. Kind of what the Prime Minister's bill actually asks for is not very much. It actually asks the government to do an inquiry into whether it's worth having a licensing scheme to sort of kind of understand what it's all about. There are loads of different ways you can potentially do it, and there may be occasions when I can put an amendment on another bill, because the whole thing is just absolute nonsense. And look, bear in mind, we've got a government that wants to build 300,000 houses a year between now and the next general election. It's going to be really difficult. It's going to be even more difficult if the place is full of dodgy builders.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's your views on that?
Which is good for the baby boomers, obviously.
That's really interesting. Where did they buy their first house? Sorry. Was it in London? Or was it in that one in
My parents.
Yeah, your parents.
So I mean, Dad, fought in the war and stuff, and kind of then was a journalist, and they lived in Knightsbridge.
Is that when they bought a £13,000 house?
No. So there's the suburb. So when I was born, I was born in what's now the Lanesborough Hotel, which was St George's Hospital, which is an NHS hospital. It was kind of all sounds frightfly grand, but it wasn't quite as grand then as it.
Blackheath.
Yeah, and then we moved to Blackheath. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, so and then I kind of brought up there, and then they retired out of Cornwall, and this is the house, kind of how
Exactly.
This is my grandparents' house actually.
Who was your local MP at the time when you had that dodgy builder? Excuse me, stuff going on downstairs. Did he help out? Your local MP? Did you write him in your capacity as a colleague?
No, I didn't actually.
Did you not? You should have.
No, but weirdly,
Yeah.
So actually, this is a really sort of happy story.
Oh, go on.
Derek Thomas. So Derek Thomas was a builder, and now Derek is doing some work on my house for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he lost his seat, and he's gone back to building. Yeah, he put a fence up for me a few weeks ago. Yeah, and I've got a garage which is falling down. I'm gonna have to go and take that.
Oh, but all your storage stuff, paintings in, and all that sort of rubbish.
No. Those are the artist studio.
If you need a garage taken down, actually, we can ask Jeremy to. He takes down sheds at the weekend. And normally that's where he is right now. Actually, that's why he's not here today.
There's a bit of an asbestos roof problem.
Oh, is that? Oh no, we don't want him being in there then.
Anyway, Del Boy needs to work.
Del Boy needs to work. Mark, brilliant. I think that's pretty much everything that we've got time for. But thank you so much.
Well, it's lovely to see you again, Ione.
I know. How's the office without me? Just have a quick round off of that. How's the office without me?
It's there's a zen-like silence in it. It's
God, are you bored yet?
Are we bored?
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of work done.
I'm working really hard. I don't believe that for a second. You've been at tennis all morning.
It's 7:30.
Now it's not. Right, Mark, thank you so much. So all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. We will be back very soon with our next podcast, Build Up from the Basement. Thank you.